Star Wars 7x7 episode 2621. So there have been a lot of news stories kicking around about rumors related to the Book of Boba Fett, and we're going to keep things very non-spoilery here on this episode, but we're going to try and narrow some stuff down about where these things are coming from, and also go back to a very enlightening quote from Temeura Morrison that kind of puts it all in perspective. Punch it. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So the Book of Boba Fett, which is coming in December of this year as revealed by Robert Rodriguez in a different interview that we already talked about here on the show. Well, there have been a couple of things kicking around about the potential plot of the Book of Boba Fett, and also, one other element. And like I said, we're going to keep this pretty much non-spoilery, but anyway. So the thing that I want to flag, first of all, is the fact that whereas I've seen a lot of outlets covering this stuff and putting their own spin on things, this really goes back to Star Wars Newsnet, which is a website that we've talked about here on the show in the past. They are, generally speaking, one of the very reliable sources in terms of rumors and leaks and spoilers out there. So anytime you're hearing about these, and I've seen so many different variations on this headline from a lot of different outlets that are trying to drive clicks and views and whatnot, but really it ultimately drives down to Star Wars Newsnet. And for what it's worth, they were also reporting on some stuff related to the Kenobi series, but they actually had imagery related to that. And, I'm staying away from that one entirely because I don't want to spoil for me. But in this particular case, they made a point of calling out the fact that they didn't have imagery for what was being said about the Book of Boba Fett and the thing they were reporting. They were just hearing something from a credible source, and that's what they were passing on, but that they didn't have the opportunity or means to validate it for themselves other than hearing it from this credible source. But here's the thing. There's an interview that Temeura Morrison did with Rotten Tomatoes a few months ago. A few months ago? Yeah, I think that's right. And he was basically selecting his 5 or 6 favorite movies, and as part of that, of course, because he's involved in the Book of Boba Fett, they interviewed him and asked him about it. Naturally, he couldn't say too much, but this is what he did say in that interview. He said, we're going to see his past, Boba Fett's past, and where he's been since The Empire Strikes Back. Somebody pointed out he's been kind of stuck in this one place, and now's the time to actually go back in time and check out his journey and find out more about him, quote unquote. Now, some of that story is actually already getting filled out right now in the War of the Bounty Hunters mega series that's happening across a bunch of Marvel comics, and also with its own little series and its own little one-shots and whatnot. And I haven't reported on that here on the show just yet because I've been waiting for it to end for all intents and purposes, but maybe I should just start digging into it a little bit. But the gist of it is about what happens to Boba Fett while he is transporting the carbonite block containing Han Solo to Jabba on Tatooine, and apparently he loses it at some point, and that's sort of the inciting incident of this whole War of the Bounty Hunters thing as I understand it. And although the War of the Bounty Hunters series is not yet completed, one thing we can say is that it's got to be taking up a significant chunk of time in between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, which is only a year. Like, there's only a year inside the in-universe chronology between the end of Empire and the start of Return of the Jedi. And it seems to be taking place, this War of the Bounty Hunter series, or starting not long after the end of The Empire Strikes Back, because Boba Fett is transporting Han's body to Jabba. So, it's pretty proximate to the events of the end of the movie. So Morrison's comments in this regard kind of suggest that maybe we have the possibility of seeing some elements of War of the Bounty Hunters translated to live action. And that wouldn't necessarily be an unusual thing. After all, we had Cobb Vanth, who was a character in a book translated to live action with The Mandalorian. And certainly with the High Republic, that whole storyline is going to eventually result in a live action series, The Acolyte. So again, not an unusual thing right now for certain characters to kind of be making the jump from the pages of things into actual live action. But all the official announcements about things have said that the story of the Book of Boba Fett is set in the timeline of The Mandalorian, and so it suggests that we are going to see Boba Fett proceed from where we saw him at the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian, and yet Morrison's comments suggest that we're also going to see some stuff in the past, like flashbacky kind of things. And for all intents and purposes, that's as much as you really need to know about the Book of Boba Fett before we actually get a trailer, which wouldn't it be nice, since this thing is supposed to be coming out in December, if we get a trailer in October? That's where I would put my money on, or even during the Disney Plus day that happens in November potentially. That's another prime spot for something like that. But that all being said, regarding the Star Wars Newsnet report, I will post a link to it in the blog post for the show's episode at sw7x7.com, and also in the show notes as well. There's only two things that are in this particular report. One of them has to do with what the general idea of the plot of the Book of Boba Fett is, and the other has to do with, a certain costume design thing, and I'll just leave it at that. And yeah, I don't think anything is really spoilery. They describe it as minor spoilers in the post on Star Wars Newsnet, and I will say that this overarching idea about what the plot could be about from this credible source, it's not new in the sense that it's a suggestion that's been out in the theorizing world since at least January of 2021, and the Book of Boba Fett was announced in late December of 2020. So yeah, I mean, people kind of cottoned on this idea pretty quickly, I think, and so yeah, it's not necessarily going to be a shocking one, but I will leave it to you as to whether you want to check it out. And that is where we're going to leave things for the show today. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.